Yes, here we go. What is up? Welcome to Last Call Reacts. Welcome back. If you've been here, but you haven't, this is where I just drop a few minute video on something that's going on, something that caught my eye in the media, social media, YouTube, the actual factual news. Like to bring it here and talk a little bit about it. And I also do a live on Fridays at 9 p.m. So join us, being Josephine. Check out the channel. Welcome to the few new subscribers as well, man. But let's get started and why we're here and what I'm dropping this week. So yesterday, and happy April Fools. I don't know what the hell that means to anybody, but yesterday was this person's day, Cesar Chavez. Who is Cesar Chavez for some of you youngies or people not out there? Let me see if I could sum this up in just a couple minutes. A Latin American leader, civil rights leader. All right. There's a few things to be able to put this in context, and really not really, but to put who he is in context and what happened and what's going on and the fallout from that as well. Anyways, he identifies basically as a labor unionist and a leftist with Catholic social teachings. Cesar Chavez, along with a lady that you'll hear about later on, Dolores Horta, and Gilbert Padilla, co-founded the National Farm Workers Association. Now, you have to give this a whole lot more thought than even things that you think or not aware of today in the farming industry. You know, there's a good what's that one with the GMO? Somebody type that in the comments. The Montesanto, who took over the farms and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, back to Cesar Chavez. He started with that organization, but basically the one and through organizing and picketing and going along with a nonviolent philosophy, he would eventually come up with what is known as the United Farm Workers. All right, uniting all the unions, all the people across the country, if not having a global ideology with that as well. So when you think of somebody like Cesar Chavez, you're thinking of him back in the civil rights days. You would see him, or you would see him, but you would see him marching when Robert F. Kennedy joined him in a part of his political campaign, and give a grace to the movement as well and bringing it to that stage. And while I, make a lot of side notes, got to make a side note with this and the impact of the civil rights movement, because now it's getting all whitewashed. It's getting all diluted and stuff, exactly what civil rights were. It was a buildup, and especially on the heels of the UN recognizing the transatlantic slave trade as the gravest crime against humanity in there. All of this stuff with civil rights leads up to that. Everything is on the back of civil rights. Civil rights taught other people, brown, yellow, red, white, LGBTQ community, all have their backbones and roots planted in civil rights. We know that. We know that back in the days with Ida B. Wells. I hope I have my person right. Ain't I a woman? And suffrage, launching the voting campaign. She had to carry that, the duality of us helping others achieve justice while pursuing just being considered as a citizen was our fight. But anyway, I digress. Let's get into a couple things and what brought us here. So again, when you think of Cesar Chavez, you're thinking of a time of marching, uprising, picketing, as I said before, sit downs, speeches. Remember, there was no computer, no internet. So you had to go to the actual event, to get the latest word of what was going on. And that's what people did back then. But while people are doing this, fighting with him, for the cause, dedicated, giving up things in order to their sacrifices to be there as a person, sacrifice so they could give to the cause. That man, Cesar Chavez, was doing horrible, horrible, crazy, perverse things. Number one, saying that he I'll use a word which is ironic because it comes up later, graping women. The one that just came out. So basically, let me do a little slingshot here. New York Times was doing an investigative report as where the lady that I mentioned before, Dolores Huerta, finally confessed in her 90s. I think she just turned 95, that she was indeed raped forcefully several times and abused by Cesar Chavez. And if that wasn't enough, he'd also be accused of doing that to minors. Not, obviously, whatever degrees you put that in for age and whatnot, or if that is just that for you and it's terrible all the way around. But these girls, as young as 12, that's a tough pill, man. That's a tough pill. So this came out, I believe, on the 20th of March, not just a few days ago. And around many parts in the country, cities, schools, buildings, statues, libraries, anything, whatever, bridges, now have to make the decision of what they're going to do on this day, March 31st, known as officially, in most cases, Cesar Chavez Day. Upon the news and release of this New York Times report. So people had to react. And this is a lot of things come to mind when dealing with something of this magnitude and this scope of how much troubling things are in there. You had Latino leaders and elected officials, people saying that they were shocked by this. They just put it sexual misconduct, but it should have such a deeper, horrible name for that. One of the Latino community's most prominent civil rights icon. They have planned celebrations and everything to adorn their leader. But these guys are like, cancel his legacy, but keep the labor movement. How do you do that? Isn't this the quintessential argument between your artists? I know some of you guys are still listening to R. Kelly this day with all of that and bumping some P. Diddy shit at your party. You separate the art or the movement from what these people do. I think that's a very tough question. And how do we have this consistency if you are to cut off this man, from the legacy and stuff? Because you can't deny he did very good things for the movement, the cause, for the people. It's tough to negate that. It's tough. And this is not an equivalency to this, but they decided to take O.J. Simpson's name or plaque off the wall at the Hall of Fame. And I'm like, well, does that deny his place in history and what he did? And I'm just using him for the how big that case was. But just to think, in everything, what about if the people that you looked up to, crossed you that way? I don't even want to get into things where, anybody out there may have been hurt, by this. I'm sure it's very different. I'm sure you have, it conjures up a lot of feelings, or you stand very firmly about a few things as well. Right. So the Times story came out, and it contains numerous reports of abuse and allegations from Huerta, Dolores, remember. Now, she stood by Chavez for decades as this was happening, and she says very clearly about it. Unfortunately, he used some of his great leadership to abuse women and children. Jesus, it's really awful, she says. Oh, she turns 69, 60. Wow, what am I, dyslexic? She turns 96 next month. So, yeah, I was there. I thought I saw she was 95 or something like that as well. Right? So she went out, and then people are reacting to this as well. Let's hear a little bit from people in the community here, what they say. Give me 1 minute. Press play.
Still, what's next will likely be tougher than removing street signs. A full reckoning with Chavez's legacy, both the vital role he played in advancing civil rights and the disturbing truth of his sexual abuse. In a letter to the public this afternoon, the Cesar Chavez Foundation said, "During this time of painful internal reflection, we do not want to lose sight of the very real threats our community currently faces. We cannot let this moment fracture what so many worked so hard to build." A sentiment echoed by the current president of the UFW, Teresa Romero.
Just before she speaks there, I know I touched on context and going back. So again, for what little you know about, or you may not know how deep farming goes and what they do, what's involved in the challenges that are faced. But imagine years ago, the workers that they used to use, the migrants, this, that, or even just poor and not detached, what the hell, disenfranchised out there, talking about citizenship, whose citizenship also was not considered, giving living wages and stuff like that. But that would be their lifestyle there versus, uh, get up, go to the truck, go to the farm, go back and live in the suburbs. They had to build their lives around this community, thus making everything that happened with it included them. But again, the context to that is super exploitation, very tough labor. No, you can't run to HR. You can't do anything. You work the fields all day. You're definitely not getting your fair share of anything. There's slavery, sharecropping, and then probably this after, I would say third. So rest.
We have in one hand Cesar Chavez, the man who committed horrible acts that we're not going to justify, that we don't condone. On the other hand, we have Cesar Chavez, the organizer, who brought thousands and thousands of people together to be able to work for farm workers. And unfortunately, those two things came from the same man.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Stephanie Sy.
Wanted to show what it said there. Former President Joe Biden. I just laugh when I, think of this guy. Kept, I should say, sorry, a bronze bust of Cesar Chavez in his Oval Office. And like I said, him and Robert F. Kennedy were close. I believe he appointed him to something in the board while he was running as well. So what did it say? Joe Biden had a little statue of him. Okay, I thought there was going to be more facts and all that, but maybe I was wrong there too. Let me just clear the air with that. So, one other thing that I wanted to get to with this, so they were removing the statues and all of that. I couldn't help but think while they were removing the statues, the last thing about the statues, except for the ones that were in New York or the horribly made statues there, we went through a thing where we were ripping down Confederate statues and everything too. And I'm on, you have to think like they should rip this stuff too, because this is what a lot of people do in emotional arguments. They're like, well, rip this down. And what does one have to do with another, a deal? Definitely different crimes. So I don't even know, when you go into one territory, if it's fair that it leads over to something else, that you were thinking, that goes with that, or do you just leave the two alone in terms of statues? Is statue a discussion, or or is it just has all those nuances that you're like, well, if you're talking about this, you can't even talk about this. But I don't know, under the umbrella of just bad people, being celebrated, and what you do with that also. Were you affected by this? Anybody, I wonder? Did you have a thought with this? I really didn't have much of a thought until I saw, obviously, you hear something like that and you're just like, God damn. First of all, the story is horrible. And then you go, oh, damn, man, that person was horrible. Damn, is it tainted now? Got to accept this. What are they going to do with that? So, started watching and then knowing that the day was coming as well, even though I don't really celebrate it. I worked, on them as well. So, it's more of a observatory at that time. And, obviously this news. And then you got to make a decision with it. So definitely not with that. But I just, for people that are erased in history, I don't know how you deal with that if they did great things and they were shitty, horrible people. Man, I would love to hear what you think about it. Some of what I think about it. See if we talk about it in the lives. This is Last Call Reacts, and I just did that. Shows once a week. Check me out. Check out the other things on the channel as well. Check me on the live, 9 p.m. on Fridays. Should be good with the co-host Josephine. Enjoy the rest of your week. Comment, share, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Peace. Be good.